Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about migrating SQL Server databases with dbatools. First things first, thank you to our sponsors. Hopefully you've been to the vendor village and checked them out, got some swag. It's been a long time since we've been able to do that, right? Obviously without them we wouldn't be able to be here today, so big shout out to them. This is me, Jess Pomfret. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a database engineer and an open source contributor. I like to put that up there because that's really how I got into talking about this stuff. I've contributed to dbatools, which we'll talk about today, and DBA checks. I've also written a couple of resources for the SQL Server DSC module, which is part of the desired state configuration from Microsoft. Passionate about automation, proper football, and fitness. I say proper football because you probably noticed I have a really weird accent. I'm actually from England originally, but I've spent 15 years in the States, and my accent is somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic now. The most important part of this slide is probably my email address and my Twitter handle. If you want to get hold of me, reach out. I'd love to talk about this stuff or about proper football. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I have been for just over a year now, which means I enjoy wandering around and speaking to people about SQL Server and PowerShell.
So I just take a photo of that slide?
Sure can. You're welcome. So we'll do a little bit about what is dbatools before we dive into some demos. So I'm not sure, are you guys DBAs? DBAs? No? Developer?
More consultant, but yeah.
Consultant? Okay, cool. So dbatools is an open source PowerShell module, and it's basically command line management studio. So databases, when we're thinking about SQL Server, we're usually using SQL Server Management Studio. And dbatools is basically a command line version of that. But it's great for handling multiples. In Management Studio, you're going to connect to one instance, look at one database, handle one login. With dbatools, we can do that with multiples. We can connect to multiple instances at once, handle multiple databases, configure multiple logins. So it gives us a lot more power. It's licensed under MIT licensing, which is a really short and simple license. It means that as long as you keep the copyright information, you can use it for whatever you want. You can use it for commercial, you can use it for personal use, whatever. And the final thing I want to mention is security. Obviously, whenever we take a PowerShell module or any kind of thing into our enterprise environment, we want to make sure it's secure. We're not bringing in any gaps or vulnerabilities. So PowerShell, the Windows or the Microsoft team, designed that in a secure by design approach. So PowerShell as a whole, as a platform, is secure. dbatools is kind of layered on top of that, so we're going to take advantage of all of those features. The code is signed, so it's an open source PowerShell module. The code is on GitHub. It's then signed and published to the PowerShell gallery, which is where you can download it from. And as long as that certificate is intact, it means the code that you downloaded is the code that we put up there. So you know it hasn't been tampered with. There's no kind of issues with that code. Pester test. So the module is made up of all of these PowerShell functions, and with each PowerShell function comes a test to make sure it's doing what it says it does, right? If we add new features and we break it, the pester test will fail, and we'll know that, so we can roll back those changes and keep the functionality working. Finally, branch policies in GitHub. If you know about GitHub, you have your main branch, which is what we're releasing from. We have a development branch, and all of the developers are pushing into that. So to get into that development branch, there's a PR process, and then certain people can push that from development into main and onto the PowerShell gallery. So it's not just anyone's code, it's going through several hoops to get on there, so it's open source, but we're definitely keeping it secure. So a short history about dbatools. It's been around for a while now. Chrissy Lemaire actually started creating this to migrate SharePoint instances. So if you know anything about SharePoint, there is like hundreds of databases and logins and link servers underneath it. She made one whole long script that moved everything from one instance to another. People were like, well, that's really useful. I could use that in my environment. So in 2015, she put it on GitHub for the community to use. It took 4 years to get it to 1.0, and it launched in June 2019. The reason why she wanted to make sure that this module was something that she could be proud of and that the community could be proud of, she standardized naming conventions, parameter names, all of the help is included. Like it was a fully functioning kind of great 1.0 release. This last July, 1.1 came out, which was another major release, and included an updated SMO version, which is what is underneath SQL Server Management Studio. And there are connection improvements for how you can handle Azure with dbatools. As of last week, there are 646 different commands in the module, and there's 590 pester tests that make sure all of those are doing what we say. Finally, the Learn dbatools in the month of lunch. So I'm one of the authors of this book. It's coming out early next year. The code on top of the book is if you would like to get it for 35% off, you can use that code on the Manning site to get either a paper copy or a PDF version. It's currently in early access program, which means if you buy it now, you can get all of the chapters that are released, and I think there are 16 currently out there, so worth checking out if you like dbatools and you want to get some more info. Now that's all the slides I've got. We will dive into the demos. If you want to hit any of the demos at home in your lab, they're all available on my GitHub. I'll pop this slide up again at the end if you want to grab hold of it. Cool. So let's switch over to Visual Studio Code. Maybe. It's been so long since I've done in-person presentations, I don't actually remember how to do it. Cool. Alright, so hopefully VS Code is coming up. We're going to walk through a couple of different scripts in here. Like I said, they're all on GitHub. First of all, I'll get you started with dbatools. We'll look at how we get that module downloaded and installed and into our sessions. We'll look at the commands available, and then we'll look at the command-based help, which is really going to teach us how to use these. Then we'll quickly take a look at splatting. So to get the module, I mentioned it was up on the PowerShell gallery. You can download it using install-module dbatools, and that'll grab the latest version from the PowerShell gallery and put it on your local machine. If you are using a machine which is not connected to the internet, you can instead use save map module on a machine that can get to the internet and then take that folder with you. If you've installed it from the PowerShell gallery, you can easily update it with update-module for dbatools. And then once you have it available, you can use import-module to bring it into your local session. That'll actually happen automatically the first time you run a dbatools command, but in your scripts and stuff, it's good to be explicit. If we do get-module, we can see the version that I have imported into my session is 1.1.22. As I mentioned, there's like 646 commands. If I want to see all of the versions available on my laptop, I can do list available. And you can see I've got a couple of older versions still available on my laptop if I wanted to. PowerShell is all about teaching you how to use it, and one of those commands we're going to learn is get-command. Now that is PowerShell standard, not dbatools. You can use that for any module. And if we say get-command for the module dbatools, you can see there is a ton of commands in there. You can also use a keyword or a pattern. So if I say, tell me about commands that deal with compression, you see we've got get, set, and test that all relate to compression. Now get-command is PowerShell, right? That's everything PowerShell. But dbatools also has a find dba command. And if I put compression in there, you'll notice that I get a few more commands come back. And the reason is that find dba command goes through all of the command-based help and grabs anything where it mentions compression. So you can see we've got backup dba database. There's a parameter on there which allows you to compress your backups as you go. So that one comes up. You can also look for certain authors commands. The reason I'm showing you this is not like, wow, look at my commands. These started off as commands that did just the small piece of work that I needed, especially backup and restore DBA certificate. And then people have added on to those and added more functionality, which makes them much more robust than the module I started with, right? So it's really the power of open source. We're sharing this code, and my functions are now better than when I wrote them, you know? So that's awesome. The second way that PowerShell wants to help us is using get-help. And when we know which function we want to use, we'll use get-help to tell us about how we will use it. So you can run just get-help, and you'll get like a basic information. You'll get a short description, some of the parameters, and a description. The parameter I really like on this is show window. And what that does is it pops up a separate window which you can use. You can search in here, and if you scroll down, there's a bunch of examples on how to use this. So you can keep that open while you're working through your on your console, working out how to run it. Cool. So the final thing worth mentioning on this is splatting. This command that I've highlighted, it runs off the screen because there are so many parameters. It's not easy to read, but what it's doing is getting the compression information from one of my databases. With splatting, you can basically reformat how that code looks into a hash table. So this bit of code here, it's more lines, but it's easier to read, and it basically creates a hash table of the parameter names and values, and then smushes it into the command. So these are the same things that I ran on that last line, but now you can all read them much more easily. That's how our demos are going to look today. Any questions on getting started with dbatools? Make sense? Awesome. So as I mentioned, one of the most powerful things with dbatools is the migration functionality that's in there. We're going to take a look at the available copy commands and then move some databases and logins from one instance to another. So first off, you can use get dash command again, and I can say I just want to view all of the copy verb commands. And you can see I've got copy dba database, I've got copy dba sp configure. There are a bunch of things that you can shift from one instance to another. Today we're going to look at databases and logins. So if I grab this splat and do get dba database, I'm passing in a SQL instance name, I'm excluding the system databases, and I'm saving that information to the DBs variable. Out variable is actually a common parameter on all PowerShell functions. If you specify out variable, the results you see on screen will also be squirreled away into that variable. So you can see I've got two databases on my MS SQL 1 instance. We can do the same for logins with get dba login. And you can see I've got a few system logins. I've got this Jess P login, which is what we're going to migrate from one to another. This will bring back Windows logins, AD groups, SQL logins. If I use get dba process, I can see if there are any processes currently running against my system. I got no results, so we're good to go. If my application was still up, I'm going to get a bunch of connections, and I'm going to want to go back to the application team and be like, can we shut it down so I can move it? But if there are processes that you need to get rid of, you can use get dba process and pipe it into stop dba process. And what that does is it takes the output from the left, pushes it through the pipe, and then onto the right. So migrating the databases, we're going to use copy dba database. We'll kick this off and then we'll talk through it. So I've got my source instance, MS SQL 1. I've got my destination, MS SQL 2. That's actually a 2019 instance. So it's coming from a 2017 instance and upgrading to a 2019. I passed in my database variable that I got earlier on, just grabbing the name parameter, and I'm using the backup restore method, which means I need to specify a shared path. Now the instance account for both the source and the destination needs to have full control on that share because it's going to back up to that and then the other instance will restore from it. I've turned on verbose true, which is the yellow you're kind of seeing on the screen. I'm just kind of nosy, I like to know what's going on. It's just outputting more information. And you can see that my database migration was successful. So if we pop this up, this is how we looked before. Two databases on the first one, none on the second one. You can see those have been copied across. Next up, we need to migrate the logins. We can do that with copy dba login. Same deal, this is going to script out the Jess P login from my first instance, create it on my second instance. This is a SQL login. It's going to copy the same. The SID will be the same. The password will be the same. So we won't get any orphan logins, which is really nice. Then we can set our databases offline. So I like to do this on my first instance. Once I've migrated them so that the application doesn't accidentally come up and look at the old ones. And I'm just going to use set dba db state for that. Once we've got them there, we can upgrade the compatibility level, make sure everything is okay. We can use get dba db compatibility to check on those levels. And this is the compatibility version of the database versus the server. So you can see on MS SQL 2, my system databases are all 150, but my two application databases are still 140. Now I can add to that hash table. So compat_splat is a hash table that just has SQL instance. I can add properties to it. So I'll add the database and I'll add the compatibility property. Then I can push that into set dba db compatibility to update that compatibility level, which now means it's running 2019 compatibility level. One of the other benefits of open source code is you can lean on kind of the expertise of other people. So obviously I recommend reading this blog post and understanding what you're doing, but this function is written based off of a blog post by Tom LaRocque, who is a Microsoft MVP. And it goes through and upgrades my database with important things that you'll want to do when you move from a lower instance up to a higher instance. So running checkDB with data purity will make sure that our column values are still in range. When you change versions, sometimes, and it was more in older versions, like date times and stuff need to be properly formatted for the newer version. Update usage, update stats, and refresh views, just things that are good to do once you move from one instance to another. So you can see the results came back. If I scroll up a little bit, you can see the database name, and then the updates were all successful, so it's ready to go. I can get my application switched over, get people connected back to it. Any questions on pretty simple migrations? This is great for small databases where there's not a lot of data to move.
When did that upgrade DBA database?
Yep.
When did that come out?
Oh, it's been out a while. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
I use DBA tools a lot, and I was working with Wales, upgrading all this, and one of the annoying things was I didn't know about this upgrade DBA database, and so I was doing invoke DBA query, and then having it done there, but
yeah, this one wraps it all up for you in that nice, easy to manage one. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So when you say small database, what's a small? What's a medium?
It depends.
Okay.
Basically, whatever your downtime window is, if you can move all of your data within your downtime window, this is perfect for that. If I'm given an hour and I've got 10 terabytes to move, I'm not going to be able to copy that, right? It's if you think about the time it takes to back up, time it takes to restore, that has to be less than your downtime window.
Push it out and you're sucking it back in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so great question. The next part I want to show you, and I'll show you this quickly, because 20 minutes is a hard time to get a lot of stuff into, is how do we migrate big databases, right? And so let's go ahead and just get the processes, if there are any. No, got none. I could kill them if there were, like if my Azure Data Studio was still looking at it. And I'll use get DBA database to just grab the databases from the destination and remove them so that we've got a clean environment again. And I'll bring my source databases back online. So now I've got two databases on MS SQL 1, nothing on MS SQL 2. If I've got a database that is too big to move in my downtime window, what I can do is I can kind of stage the data. So copy DBA database, if I change some of the parameters to say no recovery and no copy only, this is going to do a proper backup which will break the LSN chain but start an LSN chain. No recovery will leave our destination in the restoring mode so you can apply more backups to it. So if we run this guy, it'll again take a backup of my source, but again, not copy only. This is going to be the start of our LSN chain, so you do need to kind of be understanding that you're in control of the backups now, right? If you have other backups, the chain is based off this one. And then restore it with no recovery to my destination. So if we take a look here, the source is exactly the same. The destination has AdventureWorks in a restoring state. I'll do this on like the Friday before a weekend migration to get most of the data there. And then when it's actually cut over time, you can take a differential backup with backup DBA database or a transaction log backup with tail log to get any changes from the full backup to now. And then you can just apply that. So I'll now set the source databases offline. So those are done, closed. I've got all the changes in my differential, which I've just grabbed the path of the backup, and then I can restore that over. So this is just restoring the changes. So depending on how busy your database is, that could take a little while if it's busy, or if you've timed the kind of staging right, that should be a really quick cutover. And then you can see it's now online on the other source. Any questions on that one?
Great.
Awesome. So the final thing I wanted to show is the export instance command. This is perfect for documentation. But I also like to use it in this migration scenario, because what this is going to do is it's going to connect to both my instances and output a bunch of stuff about them. You can see over here that I've got an export folder with my database name, and it's outputting all this stuff. one of the things I like to look at is SP configure. So this is great in disaster recovery situations too, where you need to know what your instance looked like so you can rebuild it. But if we take a look at SP configure, this is from the MS SQL 1 database. Once it gets to MS SQL 2, we'll have another SP configure file. Come on, little friend. And there's a lot of other great stuff in it too. So like if we take a look at SQL Agent, this is going to script out all the jobs you have, all the operators, all your schedules, which is useful in disaster recovery or migration scenarios. Logins. If there's SQL logins, it will include the password set. So it's important to keep that file secure. Or there's a parameter that says don't export passwords. But I think now we've got our SP configure. So this is SP configure from my MS SQL 1. If I also open SQL configure from MS SQL 2, I can kind of compare and make sure that things are looking right. And in Visual Studio Code, you can actually do that built in, and it will highlight the differences. So you can see on the left, my instance, the left is actually the second instance, the right is the first one. You can see I had CLR enabled on my 2017 instance. This could be a problem, right? If I've upgraded and I don't have the same configuration, I can catch that now, and not when the application team is yelling at me. The only other changes are new 2019 things that were not in 2017. Cool. All right, let's pop back into the presentation. So again, if those demos, you want to take them to your home lab and play with them, it's built on Docker, it's all running on my laptop, everything is at that link. Yep, take a quick picture. This is probably in the way. Cool. Quick wrap up, resources, the dbatools blog. The top one is the book. If you want to know more about dbatools, there's going to be about 28 chapters of goodness in there that you can do on your lunch break. The secure link, that is all of the secure features I mentioned at the beginning. If you want to take this to your enterprise, I recommend that blog post as there's something you take and this is why we can use it. This is why we're enterprise ready. A couple of docs links. Docs.dbatools.io is all of the docs from within the commands on the internet, so you can easily read it. It's a really great resource. And the build link is a really great website. It's interactive, and you can see all of the different build versions of SQL Server, what the latest CU is, what the latest SP is. The last bit is just ways to get in contact. dbatools, we're really active on Twitter. We've got a Slack channel. We've got the GitHub. Finally, if you want my contact information again, or my GitHub repo, get in contact. Any questions, just let me know. Finally, there is a QR code for feedback. I think it takes you to this forms if you want to do that, but any feedback would be appreciated. I'm asked to remind you that there is a quiz tonight for the charity quiz at 7 p.m. in the ballroom. It should be a good time if you're signed up. Any questions before we wrap up? I know that was like lightning speed.
Yeah,
but I wanted to kind of share those. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Cool.
That was great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.